Now, I come from the perspective that goodness exists everywhere, and that the abundance of goodness is not something that we talk about. It's rather dormant in terms of the nature of our conversations, the narrative. But the goodness exists everywhere. It exists inside each one of us, inside each of you. It exists in our community. I knew more than anyone in this community when I was doing this job of police chief and fire chief what didn't go well in the community. I knew more than anyone. I knew about the child molestations. I knew about the sexual assaults. I knew about the domestic violences. I knew most cases about man's inhumanity to man. I knew that. But I also knew that there was something else. And so we measure our safety in a community about the amount of crime we have, which I think is pretty ironic, because I think we should measure safety by the amount of goodness that we have. Now, there's a whole other take on that. I wrote an editorial a while back where I discussed that whole aspect. But my mantra was, for every bad thing that happens, there's 1,000 good things that happen. Unfortunately, the media, our social networks, and I dare say maybe some of you, focus on the bad thing that happened as if it becomes the truth. Well, there's 1,000 good things that are happening, and we just don't talk about them. They're mostly dormant, they're mostly going unsaid, but there's a lot of that that's going on. And so the statesperson comes from the perspective of what's good. And in the class we teach when you want to change a culture in an organization, you don't look at the deficiencies that are there. You don't look at what's wrong. You don't try to problem solve everything. You say, what's good? What's happening that's good? What's happening that we want to see more of? What's happening that we want to expand? What's happening that's working well? So what if we address the issues and the perspectives, whether they're in communities, organizations, our country, and in terms of, it's not the problems that we're trying to solve, but in terms of what good is there? Because I can guarantee you that for every bad thing that happens, there's 1,000 good things that happen. And when I walked into a high school class, I did a lot of high school teaching, I said, I want people to know that mantra. And as I walked out the door, I would say, I have one more thing to say. For every bad thing that happens, and the class of 40 would say, there's 1,000 good things that happen. And so I wanted them to be left with that perspective, because that doesn't mean that we ignore the things that we don't want to see. It doesn't mean we ignore the bad. And in my world of policing, I mean, guess what we did? But we also exposed our officers, and we made it clear to our community that the goodness is pervasive. And when we changed our organization's culture, and when we changed our community's culture to think about what's going on in their neighborhoods and in their community, the fulcrum was goodness. The fulcrum was what's happening well, where is the goodness? What's happening that worked? What's happening that we want to see more of? And I can dare say as parents, that we didn't necessarily focus on what was bad all the time in our children. We saw the goodness. We saw what was working well, and we wanted to see more of that. And so oftentimes, maybe even unwittingly, parents would say, I love that. I'm reinforcing what's good. And so anyway, it's very, very important. We don't focus on the deficiencies. That doesn't mean that we don't deal with the deficiencies. It just means that we don't necessarily focus on them. We don't look at people, communities, organizations, states, countries, as problems to be solved. We look at them as possibilities. Very good, very good. That's a phrase I'd ask for you to think about and remember. You're not a problem to be solved. You're a possibility. That's what statespeople do in terms of looking at whatever they're going to change. Conversations are different. Narratives are different. Actions are different. And so, okay, we'll move on beyond that then.